It always starts the same way. Not with a fight, not with some dramatic ending, but with a shift in temperature. The messages get shorter, the pauses get longer. Their voice changes in a way you can't prove, but you can feel. Something that used to reach for you now seems to hover just out of reach. And suddenly you are staring at your phone like it holds the answer to a question that is quietly breaking your heart. What happened? How do you go from closeness to coldness without a single honest conversation in between? And the worst part is not even the silence, it's the confusion. Because when someone is openly cruel, at least your pain has a shape. But when someone pulls away with no clear explanation, your mind starts turning against you. You replay everything, every word, every delay, every moment you asked for reassurance, every time you got too close, too emotional, too real. And now you are left trying to solve a disappearance that happened while the person was still technically there. That is what no contact with an avoidant feels like. Not a clean break, a vanishing. And if you have been on the receiving end of it, you know this already. You know the feeling of being emotionally left behind before the actual silence even begins. You know how it feels when someone's body is present, but their nervous system has already run. Their heart is still beating. Their phone is still in their hand, but emotionally, they have shut the door and locked it from the inside. Here is the brutal truth most people do not want to hear. The more you chase an avoidant for clarity, the more unsafe you become in their body. Not because you are too much, not because your feelings are wrong, but because what feels like connection to you can feel like engulfment to them. And that is the tragedy. You reach for repair. They experience pressure. You ask for honesty. Their chest tightens. You move closer. Their system sounds an alarm. So while you are trying to save the bond, they are trying to survive it. This is where most people get it backwards. They think no contact is a strategy to make the avoidant miss them, a silence game, a dating tactic, a way to regain control. But no contact with an avoidant is not just silence. It is the removal of emotional demand. And that changes everything. Because avoidant attachment is not built on the absence of feeling. It is built on the fear of what feeling does to the body. Deep connection can wake up old circuitry they do not know how to manage. Their amygdala, the part of the brain that scans for threat, can react to intimacy the way another person's brain reacts to conflict or danger. Closeness becomes coded as risk. Vulnerability becomes associated with loss of control. Their cortisol rises. Their nervous system gets flooded. And instead of moving toward comfort, they move toward distance. Not always consciously. That's what makes it so painful. They may care, deeply even, but care is not the same thing as capacity. And a person can love you in the only way their defenses know how, while still hurting you with the limitations they refuse to face. So when they pull away, it does not always mean they stopped feeling. Sometimes it means they started feeling too much. Too much responsibility, too much exposure, too much dependency, too much need, too much intimacy. And because they were trained, often very early, to equate self-protection with emotional shutdown, they do what their body has learned to do best. They detach. Quietly, efficiently, almost elegantly. One day they are warm, the next day they are busy. One week they are vulnerable, the next they need space. One moment they are looking at you like you matter, The next, they are acting like nothing happened at all. This is not always manipulation, but it is avoidance. And if you do not understand that, you will personalize their withdrawal and turn their fear into your self-hatred. You will call yourself needy when you are asking for consistency. You will call yourself intense when you were trying to name the distance. You will call yourself hard to love because someone shut down in the presence of closeness. And that is how the wound spreads, not just through what they did, but through what you start believing about yourself because of it. Listen carefully. When an avoidant goes silent, the silence is rarely empty. It is full of unsent thoughts, full of emotional static, full of inner conflict they do not know how to communicate without feeling exposed, full of the urge to come closer, battling the urge to disappear. That is why the core concept here is not silence. It is emotional withdrawal. Silence is just the visible symptom. Withdrawal is the real event. They are not only stepping away from you, they are stepping away from what being with you activates inside them. And that activation is rarely simple. Maybe you represented safety, and safety felt unfamiliar. Maybe you were consistent, and consistency made them feel dependent. Maybe you were emotionally available, and availability exposed just how defended they are. Maybe you loved them gently, and gentleness reached places pain had guarded for years. You became a mirror, and not everyone can tolerate being seen, especially not by someone who sees past the mask. So now, let's go deeper into what no contact actually does. When you stop reaching, something unusual happens inside an avoidance system. At first, there is relief. Yes, relief. No more immediate expectations, no more emotional conversations waiting in the air, no more guilt from delayed replies, no more pressure to explain what they themselves do not understand, no more feeling watched by someone who can sense their distance. The nervous system exhales. This is why so many people panic too early and break no contact. Because in the beginning, it can look like the avoidant is perfectly fine, detached, unbothered, maybe even happier. They post more, they act lighter, they seem unfazed by the absence that is swallowing you whole. And that image can destroy you if you do not understand what phase you are witnessing. You are seeing decompression, not resolution. You are seeing the first wave of relief that comes when emotional demand disappears. But then something else begins. Slowly, quietly. And this is where the power starts to shift. Because once the pressure is gone, the avoidant no longer has you as the source of overwhelm. Your words are no longer triggering their defenses in real time. Your presence is no longer activating their impulse to escape. The immediate threat, at least in their perception, is gone. And in that space, feeling can finally rise without resistance. Not all at once, but in flashes. A song, a street, a moment before sleep, a random afternoon where the world gets too quiet. And suddenly, what they were running from is no longer you. It is the emptiness where you used to be. This is the part nobody sees. The avoidant sitting in a room that finally feels calm, only to realize the calm is sterile. The phone picked up, put down, picked up again. The memory of how safe your voice sounded when they let themselves soften. The strange ache of missing someone they convinced themselves was too much. The dopamine crash after losing access to the person who made them feel alive, even if that aliveness terrified them. Because avoidants often suppress longing until distance makes it undeniable. When closeness is present, their body focuses on threat. When closeness is gone, their mind can finally access absence, and absence has weight. Now imagine them late at night. No distractions left, no performance left, no excuses left. Their thoughts begin circling. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe they really did care. Maybe no one will understand me like that again. Maybe I felt trapped because I was scared, not because they were wrong for me. Maybe I pushed away the one person who actually saw me. This is how the silence changes shape. At first it protected them. Then it started haunting them. But here is where you need to be careful. Because the moment the avoidant begins to feel the loss, they may reach out in a way that is subtle, incomplete, or emotionally diluted. A breadcrumb, a casual check-in, a reaction to a story, a message that sounds light but carries hidden hunger. They do this because full vulnerability still feels dangerous. They want contact without the full emotional exposure of accountability. And if you are still starving for them, you will mistake movement for transformation. You will think, finally, they get it. But missing you is not the same as being ready for intimacy. Let that land. An avoidant can crave your presence and still be unable to sustain closeness. They can think about you constantly and still retreat the second things feel real again. They can come back because they feel lonely, dysregulated, nostalgic, or guilty. That does not mean the pattern is broken. It means the bond is active. There is a difference. This is why no contact is not supposed to be a trick to make them return. It is supposed to be the place where you return to yourself. Because if your entire focus stays on whether they are missing you, then you are still emotionally organized around their nervous system instead of your own. You are still watching their silence for clues, still measuring your worth through their withdrawal, still turning your life into a waiting room. And that is the pattern that must die. Not your love. Your abandonment of yourself. Because let's be honest, many people who are drawn into avoidant dynamics do not just want love. They want emotional certainty from someone who cannot give it consistently. They become addicted to the intermittent reinforcement, the hot and cold cycle, the dopamine spikes of reunion after distance. The unpredictability itself becomes chemically binding. Your brain starts associating relief with their return. You think you miss them, but sometimes what you miss is the end of withdrawal. That is not peace. That is dependency disguised as devotion. So during no contact, you are not only surviving their absence, you are detoxing from a nervous system loop. You are sitting through the cortisol. You are sitting through the cravings. You are sitting through the urge to send the message that would temporarily soothe you and permanently weaken you. And every time you do not break, something sacred happens. Your body learns that longing will not kill you. Your identity stops bending around someone else's inconsistency. Your self-respect starts taking up space where panic used to live. That is real power. Not pretending not to care, not playing games, not becoming cold. Real power is staying with yourself when every wounded part of you wants to run back toward the person who ran from you. Because this is the hidden transformation in no contact. At first, it feels like punishment. Then, it feels like grief. Then, it becomes clarity. You start seeing what you could not see when you were drowning in hope. You see how often you over-explained your needs just to be considered. You see how little consistency can keep a hungry heart alive. You see how often your intuition spoke and your fear told it to be quiet. You see that loving someone deeply does not mean accepting emotional starvation as your fate. And the more clearly you see, the less available you become for confusion. That changes your energy. You stop vibrating with pursuit. You stop leaking desperation through silence. You stop unconsciously telling them, "I'm still here. Come and go as you please." Instead, something steadier emerges. Non-reactivity. Not as performance, as truth. You are no longer trying to force a nervous system to choose you. You are no longer trying to decode someone whose healing is not your job. You are no longer bargaining with absence. And that is when the power dynamic fully flips. Because avoidants are often most affected when they can no longer feel your emotional reach. When the invisible cord is gone, when your energy is no longer knocking at their door, when your silence is not a protest, but a completion. That kind of absence is loud. They feel it, not because you manipulated them, but because you finally stopped feeding the pattern that protected them from their own feelings. And suddenly, they have to sit with themselves, with what they avoided, with what they lost, with what your presence used to regulate in them, with the possibility that the person they assumed would always be there has actually turned inward and chosen peace. That is when missing becomes obsession for some avoidants. Not always, but often enough. Because what they could not feel fully in the relationship, they may feel intensely in the void after it. The image of you moves differently now. Your laughter sounds rarer. Your attention feels expensive. Your warmth is no longer guaranteed. And the mind, deprived of certainty, starts idealizing what it once resisted. But please hear this warning. If they come back before they have confronted the reason they left, they will leave again. Maybe more softly, maybe more apologetically, maybe with better words, but the same unhealed system will produce the same escape. Do not let temporary tenderness erase repeated patterns. Do not let their regret become your amnesia. Do not confuse emotional access with emotional maturity. A person can cry for you and still not know how to stay. A person can miss you and still not be safe for your heart. A person can finally understand your value only after losing access to you. That realization belongs to them. Your job is not to interrupt it. Your job is to become someone who no longer begs to be chosen by people who only feel your worth in your absence. That is the identity shift. You stop asking, "How do I make them come back?" And you start asking, "Why was I trying to build a home inside someone who was at war with closeness?" You stop seeing no contact as silence. You start seeing it as the sacred removal of your energy from a place that kept misusing it. You stop calling your restraint weakness. You start recognizing it as self-honor. You stop romanticizing emotional unavailability. You start craving peace, reciprocity, steadiness. And one day, without even realizing when it happened, the person who used to stare at the phone in panic becomes someone else entirely. Someone quieter inside. Someone harder to destabilize. Someone who understands that love is not supposed to feel like chasing a locked door. Someone who knows that their softness is precious, not pathetic. Someone who no longer collapses when another person withdraws because they are no longer abandoning themselves to follow. That is when you become unforgettable. Not because you made them suffer, because you became whole. And wholeness has a frequency that people remember long after they lose access to it. So, if you are in no contact right now and the silence feels unbearable, remember this. Their withdrawal was never proof that you were not enough. It was proof that closeness touched a wound they did not know how to hold. And your silence now does not mean you are powerless.
It means you are finally refusing to pour your heart into a system that only knows how to receive love through distance. Let them feel the absence. Let them face the echo. Let them meet the version of life that no longer has your presence cushioning their fear. And you? You keep becoming. You keep choosing the part of you that does not need to chase clarity from people who disappear when truth arrives. You keep protecting the heart that kept trying to love through confusion. You keep walking until the ache becomes wisdom, and the waiting becomes dignity, and the silence becomes your rebirth. Because no contact with an avoidant is not just emotional withdrawal for them. If you do it right, it becomes emotional return for you. Back to your center. Back to your standards. Back to your name. Back to the self that existed before inconsistency made you forget your power. And once you return there, fully, completely, without apology, you will never again confuse being wanted in fragments with being loved in full.